So today we'll start with socket programming. Okay. Now socket programming is a very low level programming concept generally used in a networking domain. So what is socket? So if you want to connect two applications, okay. So if you want to connect two applications, you can create a socket and you can establish a connection in between them. Okay. Now these two applications, either it can be hosted on a server and client can connect to it, or it can be two servers and two servers communicating with each other. Okay. So when we're discussing beautiful soup, we discussed that using request library, we can make two types of request, that is get request and a post request, right? So whenever we make a get request, we are requesting a particular page to the server, right? So ultimately, one level below this, what happens that this web browser will actually create a socket with server. Okay. And you over this socket, your client and server will communicate. Your server will send the data to client over this socket. Okay. Now whenever we consider socket, we have to consider two things. One is something called port number and IP address. Okay. If you're saying that I want to connect two clients or two servers, or a client and a server, I need to uniquely identify every system. Okay, so for that we have an IP address to uniquely identify, and to host a particular application we will be using something called port number. Okay, now generally all the web applications which we have are hosted on port number 80. So whenever you are making a get request, you are connecting to a server on a port number 80. So whatever data is hosted on a port number 80, you can access that data. Okay. The example of your SMTP. Now SMTP is your mail server. It is generally configured on a port number 25. Okay. So generally port number from 1 to 100 are reserved for a specific purposes. Okay. Now after that you can use any port number for your application. Okay. So today we'll try to create a client and server architecture. So we'll be creating two files. One is server and one will be client, and we'll try to send the data from client to the server. Okay. So we have a certain set of steps to be followed. Okay, and it will remain same be it any architecture. Okay, so first thing, I need one server. Okay, and there can be one or more client. Okay, now at the moment this server is my local system. Okay, now we have this IP address and we need to decide one port number. Okay, now first step of your communication is called as binding. Okay, so what you have to do, you have to bind the IP address and port number, okay, for this particular server. Okay,
and we'll use the same configuration to other clients.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm deciding this is the IP address and this is the port number. So once I am using this, my clients can connect to the same IP address and at the same port number. Okay, now second is listen. Now if you see any server, the job of server is continuously listen for the request from the clients. Okay, so your server should be listening to the requests. Okay, third step is if someone is making requests to a server, your server should accept this request, right? Okay, and once the connection request is accepted, then next step will be sending and receiving the data. Okay. On the client side, all you have to do is connect to this particular IP and a port number, and then you will start sending and receiving the data. Okay, so steps are binding. So I will specify IP address and the port number. Then my server should listen to the request. So I need to put my server on the listening mode. If someone tries to connect to it, my server should accept. And once the connection is established, I can send and receive the data. On the client side, I'll just connect to IP address and a particular port number. Okay. So for this, Python provides a socket interface, and for that you have to say import socket. Okay, so all the functionalities related to creating a socket are defined in this module. So you'll be saying import socket. Okay. All right. So first thing, you have to create a socket. Okay, now how to create a socket? So you are creating a socket object. So this is same as your file handle, right? So you need a reference to work with a particular file. Okay, so this, you are creating the object of this class socket here. Okay, now this is your socket, and for this particular socket, now you have to specify the IP address, you have to specify the port number, you have to bind it, and you have to listen on this particular socket. Okay.
Yes, should be capital. Yeah.
So this is, so this class is created with a small s. Okay, so it depends, general convention that it should be capital, but this is with a small. Okay, so I created a socket. Now next step is I need IP address, right? Now on a server, so generally you will for a server program, your local host will be the server most probably, and your client will be connecting to this particular server, right? Now the socket interface provides multiple methods. So one of them is get host name. Okay, so if I use socket.get host name, it will fetch the current system host name automatically, and I'm storing this in a particular variable. Okay,
And this will be the server host name.
exactly. Okay, so let's say you want to host a particular thing on a particular server, and you know the IP address, then we have a method get fqdn, on which you can specify the IP address and you can host on this particular server. Okay, or if you know the web URL of that server and you want, so for that we have a method get host by name. Okay, but generally these methods will be used while connecting to a socket from a client side that you know IP address or you know URL and you want to connect to that particular server. Okay, whenever you are hosting, you will generally go with your get host name method.
FQDN is only if you only if you know the IP.
IP address, yeah. So get host name and default host name of a
This is
local
to know
host.
the DNS.
Exactly. Okay, so this is my step to find out the IP address. Okay, so once IP is done, next step is port number, right? Now you can define any random number for a port number. Just make sure you're not specifying anything from 1 to 100. Okay. So let's make it 12360. So you can define any random number. Okay. Now we'll follow a step. First step is binding, right? So for binding, we have a method called bind. But which socket I need to bind? The object for which I created using this socket.socket. Okay. So I'm taking this particular socket as a reference. For this particular socket, I want to bind the socket on a particular host, that is my current local host, and the port number. Okay. So for binding, we have a method bind. Once binding is done, your server should listen for the request. Okay. So we have a method called listen. Now you can specify how many clients can connect to this particular socket. Okay. If I specify 1, at max only 1 client can connect to it. If I specify 5, 10, I can specify n number of clients. Okay, depending on my server capacity.
For the bind method, we put in double.
Not mandatory. Okay.
And 1 year is the number of clients.
Number of clients that can connect to this socket.
Is there a limitation on that? The number of clients?
No. So it completely depends on your capacity of the server. So what's the configuration of server? If your server is capable of handling 10,000 requests, you can go ahead and set it to the 10,000. Right? Okay. All right. So far we have created a socket object.
Okay, like 1 is required, like you can keep that empty. Like,
yeah,
unlimited.
That is fine. That is also fine.
Yeah. By default is good.
By default, it's fine.
Bind needs to follow this component that it takes exactly 1 minute.
Sorry?
Bind, it removes the ports, it says it takes exactly 1 argument.
Oh. Did I connected input? No, so this is the module name, right? Stop binding network. Socket connected socket name sender. Alright. Bind address socket for IP socket address is pair of host and port. Okay, so it is a tuple. Okay. So it says for IP packets, the address is a pair, host, and a port number. So in short, the first argument it will take, it should be a tuple. All right. Okay. So far we have created a socket object, define the host, port number, bind the host to a port, and I'm specifying listen for the one connection. Okay. Now, after listening, the job of server is it needs to accept whatever socket object is trying to connect. Okay. Right. So on the client side also you will create one socket, right? So and on the client side you will try to connect. So if someone tries to connect it, so this particular socket should accept the connection. So we have a method s.accept. Now if someone connected to this particular socket, it will return two things. One is your socket object, and second, what is the IP address of that client. Okay. So it will automatically give these two things. Now this socket object is a reference of the client. So if you want to send some data to a client, this is your reference. You can send it to this particular socket. And if you want the IP address, you have this in this particular variable. Okay. So this accept will actually return a tuple. One will be a socket object and second will be the IP address of it. Okay. So once this is done, now I can perform steps of sending and receiving the data. Okay. So we'll see two examples. One is of echo server and one a simple client server. So here I'm just sending the data to the client. Now to which client I need to send the data. So I'm accepting the connection. So we have accepted a reference that is socket object. Okay. So for this particular socket, I need to send the data. So that's why I'm using this method dot send. This is the data. Again, whenever you are doing a socket communication, you will generally send the data in a byte format. Okay. Now to specify the byte string, you will specify a B here. Okay. Once I send the data, I'll close the connection. Okay, for this particular socket. So on your website also, whenever you are making a get request, after one get request your socket got closed. Okay, so it's not that once you open a particular website your socket remains open. It will fetch one website, one page, it will close the socket. If you click on the another link, it will make another get request. For that it will open another socket and it will close that particular socket. Okay. Now let's have a look at client side. So on client side, all I have to do is create a socket again. So for that I'm importing the socket, create a new socket. Here again I need to connect to a particular host and a particular port number, right? So I need a host number name. So at the moment both client and server on a local host, that's why I'm saying get host name. Okay. But generally I will be having the IP address here. So I'll be using get FQDN method with the IP address so that I can connect to a particular server. Okay. Now I need to make sure that I'm providing a same port number. Here I'm saying 12360. So it should be same, that is 123 and 60. Okay. So once I have the host and the port, I will connect for this particular host and the port, and I can receive the data or I can send the data to this particular client. Okay. So I'm using this.
So this is the port number 1000, right? 1000.
Which one? No. So this 1000 is the number of characters. Okay. So how many? Exactly. Exactly. Okay. Because generally you will see the packet size will be 1024, right? Okay. So I'm accepting 1000 characters, and whatever I'm receiving, I'll just try to print it here. Okay. Now, how to execute this? So while executing, you have to make sure that your server is running in the background continuously. Okay. So let me save this first. Okay.
This is the server file.
So this is the server and this is the client. Okay. So I need to make sure my server is running continuously. Okay. So for that, I'm using my command prompt. Okay, so first thing I need to go to that particular directory. So I copied the path. I said cd. All right. Yeah. Okay. Mhm. I need to execute this Python file, so I'm saying Python file name dot py. So this is my scripting mode normal. Okay. I need to make sure that this is running in the background. To make sure this running in the background continuously, I need to put an ampersand after the file name. Okay, so that this script will run in the background as a background process. Now if I hit enter, okay, you can say it's still waiting for the response. Okay, your server is now waiting someone to connect to this. Okay, so for that I'm going to the client and I'm executing it here. Okay, I can say this is the data from server. So this is something I was trying to send it from the server. If I go to command prompt now, you can see, okay, so I printed everything. So this is the IP address and this is the entire socket I printed here. So if you see on the client side, so connector on the server side. Okay. So once I get connected, so I'm printing address from and this address and the socket object details. Okay. All right. So few things. You can see this family is af.init and the type is equal to socket kind dot socket string. Okay, so defaultly whenever you create a socket, it will create a TCP socket for you. Okay, now we have two types of socket. One is your TCP or a UDP, right? So when we use TCP, so whenever we need to make sure that whatever data we are sending is sent to the client successfully, we will be using TCP sockets. But whenever speed is important than the data, then we prefer UDP sockets. So all the HTTP applications or a mail server application operates on your TCP sockets. But if you see the entire industry of online gaming, it uses UDP sockets. Also, your DNS system works on a UDP sockets because we have multiple DNS servers. The performance matters there rather than the actual sending and receiving of the data. So it depends on that. So defaultly it will create a TCP socket for you. Okay. So steps, I'll execute the server from the command prompt. I need to make sure that this is running in the background. So I'll be putting ampersand and I can use my Sublime to run my client program. Okay. Now the steps will be similar, be it any socket. So we have another example where we're trying to generate a eco server. Now what is eco server? Eco server is mainly used whenever you are developing a new client server architecture. You have to make sure that your client and server are able to communicate with each other, and whatever data we are sending, we are getting it back correctly, right? So this is something also called as a handshaking. So okay, where's the file for that? Okay, so let's have a look at the steps. So first I'm importing socket module. I need a host and a port. Again, same thing that okay, I'm defining get host by name. So this will give me a host and I'm defining a port number. I cannot run two things on the same port now. I'm making it 65. Okay. So once I create a socket, I need to bind it a host and a port number. Okay. Once I done with binding, I'm listening to it and I'm accepting it. Okay. So now I will have two things, that's connection and the IP address of this. Okay. So this is the eco server. That means if the client sends something, so your server is listening continuously and it will send it back to the server. Okay. So we have a method receive to receive the data from this connection. So while accepting, I have accepted the connection in this particular object, that is connection. So I am receiving the data from this particular socket. Okay, so I just printed the data, and once I receive the data, I am sending back the data to this connection. Okay, so I'm receiving data from the same socket. Once I receive it, I'm sending back the same data. Okay,
What is 1024?
it's again size. So in last example it was 1000, here it's 1024. It's a generally packet size. Okay. On the other hand, client, same thing. I'll connect it. I need to make sure that port number is same. I'll create a host and a port. Now on this socket, I'm sending the data. Now once I send the data, I'm receiving the data again and I'm printing the same data.
One quick question. Host is a socket of that host name.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are connecting to the server, right? So do we need to give the host name?
So here to connect to a host, we have two things. One is we need a host name and a port number, right? Now at the moment, my server, my host is localhost. So both client and server are hosted on a local host, right? Now, if you're hosting on a server, so instead of using get host name, you will use get fqdn method and you will specify the IP address of server. Okay, that will be the only difference. The rest of the steps will be similar. Okay. All right, again to execute this, I need to go back to command prompt. It got stuck. Let's make sure that I have saved it on a correct port number. So it's 12365, save it. And this is 12365. All right. Okay, so Python. Okay, making sure I'm running in background. So this is running. Now once I execute the client, my client will send some data to the server and my server should send it back. Okay. So I'm getting some data from server. Let's go back to the server. We can see, okay. So it's showing connected by this particular IP address and it's sending the data. Okay. So this is the example of your eco server. Okay. Want to try this? So steps clear in socket.
The packet size cannot be more than 102.
Generally it will be 1024. Yeah.
Another question here. You wrote that by default you create a TCP. So how do we create a UDP socket?
So you can create a UDP socket while creating here. You can specify the family. Just the help of this socket. So it will provide a lot of built-ins. Alright, here. So we have this type field. So the socket class access. Oops. So I don't know the exact parameter name, that's I'm trying to use help. Right. Let's do one thing. Where this is giving error in connect, right? So let's connect everything. Let's keep import. Mm, where is teammate process? Some files. Yeah. So for family, you can specify two types of family, and here type is equals to socket.stream. What's the exact name? Is it a datagram? So you can specify the type attribute here, but what's the exact attribute for this? Kind of. They should provide it here, right? Initialize self accept. Let's give it a try. Any error, it should show something. If I'm not wrong, this is the one, or DG, something like this. Where I'm writing this. Submit. And extra brackets. So type equals to this. Right, this is eco server. One, two, three, six, five, and close. See this. Okay, so this is executing. Client. Oops, we missed something. Do we need to include something for this? Is it DC? Oops. What was the name for this? Let's try again with this one. No. It's a socket string, right? It was something like this for TCP. Not working. Let's try one more time. So the socket string, this is for TCP. Something for UDP. So
Sock underscore deep.
sock underscore.
Deep.
it's deeper. It must be here, right? So sock underscore stream.
Region, right?
Oh yeah. So we need post and report. We will need a socket. Alright. And server running. Yeah. Mm, Now what's the issue? An existing connection. Right. One two three six six. 1 2 3 6. And here we will just print the socket object so that we can one two three six six. Right. Because the target machine actively refused it. Oh, we wasted a code. Wasted a code.
Jesus.
67.
She's
67. Save it. Python server and alright. E client. Possibly caused by remote host. Let's try making both of them a UDP1. Sixty-eight. Attempted operation is not supported for a type of object reference. Now this is something new. So what to try to do? Let's execute this one here. Is it due to the UDP?
See that.
It's not working.
It's not listening this.
It's not listening actually. So it is saying for this particular type of object you cannot listen. What I'll do, if I created this socket, instead of binding and doing these things, just print this thing. Let's see what it says. Okay, so this has created the datagram socket. What is this photo? Socket FT 450, you have this family, socket kind. So socket is getting created. Let's go step by step. Bind is working fine. I don't think so. Is it because of socket type? So when we create a TCP, so this is working, but it's not working for UDP. Okay. Now let's try connecting to this socket, but I cannot connect UDP to TCP. So this is 170, listen, connection by accept. Connection this. So this is DRAM socket.
The client is on a UDP, right?
Yeah, chances are very less that it will work. Okay, so now this is the TCP. Oh. I executed a server. And is the client. So it's not allowing to connect a TCP to UDP, and it's not listening to the UDP actually. So need to check what's the issue. Check. I'll look into this. I'll drop mail to you guys what exactly happened here. Okay. But got the whole idea? What's the different steps we used in the socket? So steps will be, I'll be define the port and the host. Then I'll bind it. Then listen. Then accept. And then I can send and receive. On the client side, all you have to define is the port and the host, and you will connect to the server and then you will send it. Okay. So last topic, we will work with the databases. So I'll try to do CRUD operations. Okay. So we'll start with SQLite. Okay, now Python defaultly provides a library to work with the SQLite database. Now SQLite is a lighter version of MySQL, and both of them are open source. So SQLite is generally used whenever the data size is smaller, but as your data size grows, you have to migrate it to the MySQL. Performance wise, for a small data set, your SQLite, you can say it's better than MySQL, but as the data grows, yes, preferred one is a MySQL. Syntaxes, if you compare, the syntaxes will be exactly same. So all the query syntaxes of MySQL and SQLite are exactly same. Okay. All right. Before actually going to the database, all right. So we have something. So we have MySQL, Oracle, NoSQL is getting popular, and we have Mongo. So be it any database, you can connect to this using Python. Okay, so steps will be almost similar. There will be a small change while connecting to database, but you can connect to any database using Python. Okay. Now you can see this Mongo is generally mainly used whenever you're working with a mean domain. That is, mean stands for your Mongo, E for your Express.js, A for your Angular, N for your Node. Okay.
And for
Node.js. Okay. So in mean architecture, generally preferred database is your Mongo. NoSQL is getting popular whenever you have unstructured data. Okay. Now, when we say a table, we have fixed set of columns, and in the fixed set of columns, we'll be adding values, right? But nowadays, if you consider, if you take the data from the internet, we cannot specify the fixed structure. So in such case, your NoSQL will come into pictures, and you can make use of NoSQL in that case. Oracle and SQLite. So SQLite, MySQL, you can say this is an open source tool, proprietary tool. So industry is using Oracle and MySQL equally, we can say. And you can connect to any one of them using Python. Okay. Now, just a top level structure, we will have one database. Okay. Now inside the database, we can create multiple tables. Anyone what is table? In terms of your databases? So I will have something called attributes, or I can say something called columns, and column headings I will have. So let's take example of employees. I will have employee ID, employee name, let's say salary, let's say department, something like this. Okay, and I will be storing the data here, right? So it will exactly look similar to your Excel table only. Okay, but I can create multiple tables. Okay, now whenever you are working with a database, you have to make sure that you can write a data to these tables, and whenever you need it, you are able to fetch the data from a particular table, right? uh, so here we have two parts, one Python part and second your SQLite part. Okay, so we don't have much to cover on the Python part. Okay, so I'll try to discuss queries, but I'll recommend you go through all the MySQL syntaxes. Okay, anyone using SQL? You're using SQL? Okay, perfect. All right, so we have set of queries, standard set of queries. First thing we have something called create table. What I will do, let's start with code directly. Okay. Now to work with SQLite, all you have to do is import and your module name. Okay. So first thing, same as you're opening the file, you have to connect to a particular database. Okay. Now the extension will be .db for this. Okay. Again, I can specify anything here. If this particular DB does not exist, your SQLite will create one DB for you. Okay. So, right. If I execute this at the same location, it will create one DB file. Okay. If it exists, it will open the existing one. Now in this database file, you will create multiple tables. You can create multiple tables. Okay. Right. So first job is to connect to that particular DB. So we have a method called connect. Now same as your file handle, it will give you one reference. So I'm accepting this in a reference called connection. So once I have a reference to work on this particular DB, I'll be using this reference. Okay. All right. Now, so on the Python part, we only have this connect method to connect to a particular database. If you want to close the connection, we have something called connection.close. Okay. So same as your handle.close, I'll be writing connection.close here to connect the data, to close the database connection. Now once this is done, we have only one method on the Python part, and that is execute method. Okay. So all the SQL queries which you have, you can execute using this execute method. Okay. Now let's start with syntax. So I have created a database so far. Now I need to create some tables inside it. Okay. Now Python is case sensitive, but your SQLite, your NoSQLs are not case sensitive languages. Okay. So that is the reason if you are writing a Python script for your database access, make sure you write your Python statements in a lowercase, which is as expected, but to give a proper distinction, you can write your SQL queries in all caps. Okay, so which will give you the clear distinction that, okay, so this is my Python part and this is my SQL query. Okay, so first query we will be executing is create table. Right, so syntax is, so you'll write create table. So this is a standard SQL command. Create table, then you have to specify the table name. Here I'm just specifying an extra thing that if the table does not exist, then only create it. Okay, so syntax is create table. So this is the and table name. So now this table name will be user defined. So I'm saying create me a table name employee. Okay. Now you have to specify what will be the different column in that particular table. Okay, so here I'm specifying it will be ID, name, age, address, and salary. So these are the things I want to specify. Okay, now we have seen that in Python we do not specify what is the data type of a particular variable, but in SQL you need to specify what kind of values you will be storing for this particular values. Okay. So I'm specifying this ID will be an integer, so this name will be a text field, this age will be again integer, this will be a character of length 50, and this can be a floating point number, so we have a real data structure for that. Okay. Anyone? What is primary key? Exactly. So whenever we create a table, we need something which will uniquely identify the each row. Okay. Something like this. So whenever we are creating a table, we let's say in future if you want to fetch the data, then you have to make sure that you get a unique value if you fetch a particular column. Okay, so that particular column is called as your primary key column. Okay, so here I'm saying my employee ID will be a primary key. So when I say this is a primary key, which means if I take any employee ID, I will get only single entry for this, and I can get unique data for that particular field. Okay, because there's a possibility that name can be duplicate, right? Salary can be duplicate, so I can say employee ID, I will specify something which will be completely unique. Now whenever I say that this employee ID will be unique key, now your SQL will not allow you to add duplicate values for this particular field. Okay, so it will put a restriction on you. Again, we have some extra fields, like you can specify that okay, I cannot keep this as a null, so I need to enter the value for this. Okay, but I'm specifying, if I do not specify this address and the salary field, it means that it's okay even if I do not put a value for this field, it will not throw me any error. Okay, but if I do not put a value for ID, name and age, it will not allow me to create a table by inserting the value. Okay, so again, so from Python perspective, all we have to do is we have opened the connection, we will be using this execute method, and I will be writing my entire SQL queries in a multi-line string. So that's why I'm saying this is inside a triple quotes.
We want to create a string outside and then just execute as
Which one?
as equal to the entire retrieval statement, and then inside execute we can just put a string.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Same thing. Okay. So this is my multi-line string to create a table. So once I execute this, it will create a table called employee in my database. Okay. Now next step is how to insert some values. Okay. So for that we have a query called insert into. So syntax insert into table name. Okay. And you can specify in which columns you have to add the values. Okay. So this is not mandatory. Even if you specify, if you do not specify this and just specify the values, it will work. Okay. Here I'm saying that insert into this table name employee and add the values like ID, name, age, and all these columns. But which values you want to add, so you have to specify with this values attribute. Okay, and these are the values I want to add to the database. Okay, so I want 3. Let's start from 1 again. Okay. So I'm saying execute again. To execute any SQL query, we have only one method, that is execute. So add your entire SQL query here. So I'm adding 2 rows. Okay. Once you add it, you have to make sure that you are saving it on a database. Okay. So to save, we have a command called commit. Okay. Again, this is a SQL command. So you have to execute it from Python. You can use this connection.execute of commit statement. Right. So now if I execute this, so it will not show me any output. It has created the 2 values, right? It will create a table, so it will add 2 values. Okay. Now if I execute the same statement again, okay, it will throw me an error. It will show me that integrity error, unique constraint failed, employee ID. Okay. Why this? Because I'm specifying this employee ID, so this will be a primary key, which means it will not allow me to add a duplicate values, right? So I have already added this 1 and 2, so I cannot add a duplicate. So if I just make it 3 and 4,
Yes.
it will not throw me any
So
error.
basically now 4 tables are there, the 4
So-
unique values.
So
are there.
so there is one table, and in one table we have 4 values. Okay. Now let's how to fetch these values. Okay. So generally to get the answer, we have select queries, right? So whatever changes you have done, whatever values you have added, right, you have to save it. If you forget to save it, if you close the program and next time if you try to fetch it from the database, you'll not get anything.
So the commit is from Python, say? Or?
No, it's a SQL set. Okay, right. Next query is select query. So select, then you can specify the column names which you want for which value. It's okay if you do not specify this again. So you can just say star also. So if I say select star from employee, it will fetch all the columns, or I can explicitly specify the column names here. Okay. So from employee, so it will fetch all the records and it will return a cursor object. Okay. Now this cursor object is a iterable object in the Python. Okay. So what it will, so each row will be one tuple. Okay. So print row. I'm commenting this statements of inserting the values. Okay. So we added 4 rows. Now to get all the data which we have stored, we can run this select queries. Okay. So when I say select from employee, it returned one cursor object. Okay, I'm accepting into a cursor now, which is an iterable object. So I'm executing one for loop. So for row in cursor. So in each iteration, it will fetch one row. Okay, and what will be the data type? Okay, so it will return a tuple. So in short, you can iterate over this row also to fetch a particular value. Okay, so it will return a cursor which is iterable, and each row it will contain one record. Okay, so again I am executing this execute function. Okay, if you also want to do some update operation, again you will do the same thing, that connection dot execute and your update query. So this is the example of your update query, that I'm updating the salary value where employee ID is 2. You can see at the moment the salary is something 15,000. I'm making it 80,000. And once I update it, I'm again committing it. Okay. To view the changes, again we need to run the select queries. So syntax will be same. So execute from employee, and let's print everything again. Okay. Did I comment it the first? Okay, yeah. So I commented the first part. So now you can see the ID got updated to 80,000. Okay. So this is example of your update query, and similarly you can execute the delete queries also. Okay. Now to delete a particular record, we can say connection dot execute. All you have to write a delete query, that is delete from table name and which row exactly you want to delete. So I'm saying for ID, where ID is equals to 2, just delete this particular record. Once
In the first we accepted the cursor, right? Selecting the records.
So cursor is just output of your select query.
If we do same thing in the delete query, what will be the result like success?
So actually for a select query it will return a cursor, but a delete query will not return you anything.
It will be done.
No. Okay. So I'm deleting this particular part. Again, if I want to see the results, I need to run the select query, and it will show which are all values I have in my database at the moment. Okay. You can see earlier it was containing 4 records. Now it just contains 1, 3, and 4 records. Okay. So from Python perspective, we have only one thing, that is connection.execute, and rest of the part is your SQL. Okay. So you can execute, be it your join query, be it your having clause, like clause, anything you can execute using this execute method. Okay. If you want to connect to a SQL rather than MySQL, So you have to download this MySQL DB from the SQLite from the MySQL website. Just import MySQL DB. Okay. So this method will be different. That while connecting, we just specified the database name, right? But in case of SQLite, so you have to configure your SQL workbench first, and you will set a username and the password and the database first, right? So once that is created from MySQL workbench, all you have to do is specify the host name, which will be current localhost, or your username, which you are giving while installing MySQL, your password while installing MySQL, and the database name. Okay, so only this part will be different. Now again you have this connection object and you have connected to a particular database. Now again you can execute all these queries using this connection.execute part. Okay, so only this part will change if you even if you try to connect to MySQL also. Okay, so Python part will be same, be it any database. Any queries?
Is there any that let's say I have got SQL file separately. I need to run that with the SQL code is there. Can we directly with the file name?
Same. So database you are specifying here, right?
No. This is .py file.
Yes.
I have separate .sql file.
So that's what. So whenever we create a database, it is creating a separate .db file, right?
So that .sql file has just the code.
Exactly.
Over and executed.
So using the same execute method. This will file name. So you're while connecting, you will connect to this particular thing, that file name. Okay, and you will execute that.
So we need to write F1 to open that SQL file.
No need to do that.
You can give the path and
file name path. Okay. All right. So one more thing, as Python is an open source community, in future, if you write your own package, if you have created your own code, we have something called
I said Ziegler also contributed.
we're contributing. Okay, so we have this website that is Python package index. Okay, so you have to log in, you have to create your own account, and you can upload your Python package here. Okay, now few steps. So ultimate aim is whatever code you are writing, so you will be writing in a modules, right? Now modules is nothing but my .py file, right? We have installed Beautiful Soup, right? So we have done pip install Beautiful Soup 4, and it downloaded a package for us, right? So whatever module which you have developed, you want to make this something available to everyone so that everyone can install using this pip command also. Okay, so for that we have a specific structure. So I'll be writing my modules, so that will be my .py files, right? So once I have all the py files, I'll just create one directory. Okay, and in that directory all I have to do, create one file called init__.py. Okay, it will be empty file. Okay, so a folder, inside that folder there should be a file called init.py. Okay, and I'll be having this model.py. Okay, now whenever you define a init.py in any folder structure, it will automatically take it as a Python package or a Python directory. Okay, so this code, for this if we want to upload it, we need to specify something called setup.py.
We separate files
Exactly.
in the same folder.
Yeah. Okay. So we will be creating a file called setup.py. Now this setup.py will actually contain all the information about who is the author. Okay. What is the Python version number? Okay. Then what are the dependencies? Okay. But to use this particular package, do you need any other package to be installed for or not? Okay. So these dependencies, then licensing. What else? If I'm not wrong, what else do we need? What else do we need? Okay. We will have a README file for this, but we don't have to set it file in the setup.py. Okay. So these are some of the things which we will need. It's not end of it. There are actually 10 to 12 things. If you want to add, you can add it there. Okay. So once you have this setup.py file, you will create a particular directory. So your directory will contain this init.py, setup.py, your actual module. All these files, either you can upload it to a Git, or you can log in here and you can upload this entire structure here. Okay. Once the structure is available in this pypy.index file, then anyone can install your package from the system. Okay. So this site is Python package index. So everybody is contributing this here. Okay.
How people can do like new package or something.
So yes, here you can see the information, but the best way to do that is define one more file called readme.txt. In the same file, you need to specify what exactly this package is capable of doing. So once it's on a GitHub, anyone who goes for this package first, obviously this is general practice, you will read the README file first, and in the package installer also you will be reading the README file. Okay. So again, it's the same as your Google search engine, that initially you will not get much indexes initially, but as it gets crawled by the web pages, you will get higher visibility for your package. Okay. So it works in the same principle.
Is there a kind of forum out here where you can post your issues and it can be contributed by the community?
So let's see.
Will someone verify like whatever you have uploaded is just yes?
It looks like someone verifies it. Yeah, it looks like.
It doesn't get it. Whenever we upload, it doesn't get it.
It immediately no. It immediately no. Community wise, I'll prefer Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow, I guess, kind of a best source to find your queries. And recently, it is from June 2017, Python is the most used hit keyword in a Stack Overflow also. So yes, Python is getting popularity on Stack Overflow also. Right. Okay. So I'll mail you guys the project statement. So I'm planning two things. One is email automation. Okay. So for that, you have to explore a bit. I'm not giving everything ready-made. So for that, you need to learn a bit of HTML, CSS, so that you can create your own HTML template. Okay. For this, we will be using a library called SMTPlib. Okay. So this library you have to explore. So this is generally used to send and receive the emails. Okay. So ultimately, expectation is you will have one file in which it will contain the email IDs. You should read the file and pick the email IDs, and it should send the email templates, the selected email templates to everyone. Okay. So for the next step will be you can create multiple templates, and in file only you can specify for this email ID what kind of email templates you need to send, and you need to improve your logic such that it will automatically pick a email template from there and it will send it. Okay. So this is one, and second is your process monitor. Okay. So initially you can develop this for a local system to monitor what is the CPU usage, okay, RAM, the running processes. Okay. Going forward, you can deploy it on any server to get all the statistics related to server. Again, you can extend it for the networking, that which systems are connected to a network, what is the overhead of the networks. So for that, you have to explore this library called PSUT. Okay.
So this library will help us to get modules to get what is
the usage exactly. So you have to get habituated to this, because so first thing, if you get any problem statement working with Python, don't start coding directly. First thing you have to check, is there any open source library for this, because there is 80 to 90% chance that there is a library already present for this. So all you have to do is just import that library and use the functions. Okay. So and if you know the basics, it will hardly take 1 or 2 hours to explore any particular library. To master it, yes, it's a different thing, but to explore library, to use the basic functions, hardly 1 or 2 hours.
How do you find
So we have official documentation for every library. Okay. So if you say smtp lib python.org, just Google it. Oh, let me find SMTP. SMTP. Okay, alright. So you get such two links. One is for Python 2.7 version, one for Python 3.6 versions. Okay. This is the official documentation, best thing to read from. Okay, and this is present for every library on a pip index pages. Okay.
This was the case when you knew that there is a library with this name. Like you said, if we have a problem statement, try to search if there's no library.
So I guess we have a search on your Python package index site. Python package index. So this is also called as PyPy. Okay, so just email, and it is showing me email 3.0, all our Django's. Wow, we have a lot of Django libraries here. Do we have SMTP lib here? Flask. No.
Control.
So it's alphabetically added actually. It's search because they have categorized it. Just maybe. Let's try searching with different keyword. Scrapping. I don't think this search is that much powerful. We have to scrap.
This is
So these are some of them are actually, you can see these are built on top of Beautiful Soup, you can see. Right, so someone has created their own libraries. I guess I read somewhere. Okay. To scrap reviews of product on Amazon. See, so you have a direct library for this. They have already written for. Yeah, so simple web scrapper built on top of request and the Beautiful Soup. HTML client. How about categorization? Because that time which is searching would show me a lot of things like that. Nope.
You can browse packages and then
Yeah.
the top. That's it.
This package. Okay, discussion security. News downloads. So you have to explore it a bit, I guess. But yes, 80 to 90% chances are there you will already get a library for this. Okay. All right. So we will stop here. Okay. Hope you guys must learn something new. Sure. Thank you guys.
So Linux will be having default Python like
Yes. So Python Linux will get 2.7 version defaultly. Default.
to upgrade that one.
So we can use pip command also. Pip upgrade. But will there pip will do or sudo? But I guess it's a pip will do. Pip will do. Pip upgrade. Okay. Oh, what?